The cargo freighter Starwind Hauler drifted silently in the orbit of Miriath 9, a world so cold that even the docking bays of its orbital station radiated frost. The ship was large and clunky, its hull patched in places from decades of service. Inside, the hum of machinery echoed through narrow corridors, mingling with the faint hiss of cooling systems. For the crew, this was routine. They had offloaded hundreds of shipments in their time, but today a crate marked human in priority delivery glowed faintly, drawing attention without any real reason. Commander Rel, a tall Miriathan with forearms and scales that glimmered under the harsh fluorescent lights, inspected the cargo. His species valued precision, strength, and discipline. Emotions were a liability, a weakness that only humans seemed to possess in abundance. Rel had heard of humans before, fragile creatures capable of surprising bravery, but he had never seen one. He didn't understand why anyone would order one as a bride. The crate hissed as the automated systems began opening it. A thick cloud of cold mist escaped, curling like smoke around the cargo bay. Inside lay a human woman, her small body curled and stiff from stasis. Her hair, dark and damp with condensation, clung to her face. Her lips were pale, almost blue, and her tiny hands shook uncontrollably. The cold had seeped into her bones. Rel's instincts kicked in. He had been trained to preserve cargo, to maintain order, but this was no ordinary shipment. Something about the human stirred a strange impulse, a pull he did not understand. He stepped forward and, ignoring protocol, opened the crate fully. His forearms worked quickly, carefully lifting her from the stasis pod. The other crew members froze. Physical contact with humans was considered unusual, even reckless. Their physiology was fragile, their bodies weak, and their emotions unpredictable. Yet Rel did not hesitate. He wrapped his uniform's heating core around her shivering frame. The warmth seeped into her skin almost instantly, and a soft gasp escaped her lips. Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. Her teeth chattered, and she could barely form words. She stared up at him with wide, frightened eyes, still unsure if she was awake or dreaming. Rel grunted, unused to conversation beyond orders. "Stand," he instructed simply. His eyes scanned the bay. Everything was intact. Nothing was damaged. The rest of the crew watched silently, unsure how to react. The human's body slowly began to relax. Her breathing became steadier, though her hand still trembled slightly. She was fragile, yes, but alive. That was enough for Rel. He had seen enough cargo destroyed, enough mistakes that cost lives, and he would not allow this creature to suffer from neglect. Days passed as the ship continued its detour to deliver her safely to the colony. The original destination had been delayed because the stasis pod malfunctioned mid-route. Lena, as she finally introduced herself, had been ordered to marry a colonist who expected her to arrive frozen and obedient. Instead, she had awoken to find herself on an alien vessel with creatures she could barely understand. At first, she was cautious. She watched Rel carefully, noting the way his arms moved, the way he looked at her without speaking much. He was not cruel, but neither was he openly kind. There was no easy warmth in his manner, no gesture she could read. Yet the memory of his first act, wrapping her in heat when she was frozen, remained in her mind. It was enough to spark trust. She began moving around the ship slowly, learning its rhythms. Lena observed the alien crew, how they interacted without words, how they performed tasks efficiently, without hesitation or emotion. Their lives were regimented, precise, almost mechanical, yet somehow the ship did not feel cold when Rel was near. His presence created a subtle warmth that she could not explain. One morning, Lena tried to assist in the maintenance of the ship. She found a small panel in the cargo bay that required adjustment. Her fingers were nimble, and she had studied the schematics during her long journey in stasis. Rel noticed her approach and tensed slightly. Miriathans were wary of humans meddling with machinery, considering their delicate hands a potential hazard. "Careful," he warned, his voice low. "You may cause a short." "I can manage," she replied softly, though her voice carried a hint of defiance. She had survived stasis, survived a freezing journey across space. She was not about to be frightened by a warning. As she worked, Rel observed silently. The warmth of her presence, subtle and human, began to spread through the bay. The other crew members noticed too. Miriathans rarely acknowledged such things, but even they began to pause, watching the human in quiet fascination. She was not a threat, she was different, By the third day, Lena had managed small tasks around the ship without incident. She learned to anticipate the crew's movements, to hand them tools at exactly the right moment, to adjust panels without causing sparks. Rel began to approve not verbally, but through small gestures, a nod, a step back to allow her space, a slight adjustment of a lever to help her reach a panel. The humans slowly began to feel at home aboard the alien vessel. The initial fear, the shivering terror of frozen stasis, had begun to fade. She laughed softly to herself at Rel's stiff, confused movements. He did not understand humor, not fully, but he noticed it. He noticed the way her eyes sparkled when she smiled, and he felt something unfamiliar stir within him. Late one night, the ship passed near a belt of frozen asteroids. The navigation system strained to keep the ship on course. Alarms blared and the lights flickered. Lena, still awake, rushed to Rel's side. He was adjusting the power cores to stabilize the engines. His movements were precise but tense, his scales bristling under the stress. "Do you need help?" she asked, her voice steady despite the chaos. He started, then paused. Myriathans did not often ask for assistance. To do so would be admitting weakness, yet he could not ignore the offer. "Yes," he said simply, handing her a tool. Together, they worked to stabilize the ship. Lena's human intuition complemented Rel's precision. She suggested small adjustments that he had not considered. Slowly, the engines roared back to stability, the lights steadied, and the alarms ceased. For the first time, Rel allowed himself to feel a faint sense of relief. "You did well," he muttered, almost reluctantly. Humans were unpredictable, but they were capable of ingenuity. This human in particular had proven herself capable. Lena smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We make a good team," she said lightly. He frowned, unsure if the words applied to them or to the machinery. Yet even he could not deny the truth. Her presence had changed the dynamics aboard the ship. She had brought warmth, laughter, and adaptability, things the Myriathans rarely exhibited. Over the next few days, Lena continued to integrate herself into life aboard the ship. She learned the routines of the crew, adapted to their ways without losing her own humanity. She asked questions about the stars, about the cold planet below, about the strange customs of her alien companions. Rel, who had once ignored such curiosities, began to answer in small, careful sentences. One evening, as the stars streaked past the viewports, Lena sat near Rel. She noticed the faint glow of his core, the warmth radiating from him even in the chill of the cargo bay. Tentatively, she reached out and touched his arm. The gesture was simple, innocent, yet it carried meaning. Rel stiffened. Physical contact was unusual. He had never allowed it before, not with any being. Yet he did not pull away. He did not stop her. Instead, he felt warmth, something unlike the heat of the core, something more subtle, more human. "You helped me," she whispered. "I did not intend to harm you," he replied simply, though the words did not capture the feeling growing inside him. The ship hummed softly around them, carrying two beings from entirely different worlds. One was fragile, human, full of emotion and warmth. The other was disciplined, alien, precise, yet beginning to learn that life could be more than order and efficiency. As the detour continued, Rel began to realize something profound. The human in the cargo box was not merely a passenger. She was a presence that challenged him, that taught him to consider warmth and care as strengths rather than weaknesses. And Lena, in turn, began to see that not all aliens were cold or unfeeling. Even a Myriathan commander could show kindness, bravery, and perhaps something more. By the time the ship neared the halfway point of its journey, the bond between them had grown. Lena no longer shivered constantly. She moved with confidence and curiosity. Rel no longer regarded her as merely fragile cargo. He regarded her as someone he was responsible for, someone whose presence made the cold corridors feel warmer, whose laughter made the ship feel alive. For the first time in both their lives, they understood that help could mean more than survival. It could mean connection. And it all had begun with a simple act, the warmth shared over a small frozen crate. The Starwind hauler glided steadily through space, its engines humming a constant rhythm that seemed to settle nerves and thoughts alike. Lena had adapted to life aboard the ship, moving through the corridors with a mix of curiosity and confidence. She learned the patterns of the crew, the timing of the shifts, the way the Myriathans moved with purpose and precision. She had discovered small joys along the way, the way the starfields changed color as the ship adjusted its course, The way the artificial gravity made her feel almost weightless. The small moments when Rel's usual stern expression would soften, just slightly, when she did something unexpected. It was during one of those quiet moments, late in the ship's watch cycle, that Lena noticed a panel flicker in the engine room. Sparks danced along the edge of a conduit, tiny but dangerous. She moved quickly, brushing past Rel, who had been inspecting a separate system. "I can fix it," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. Rel looked at her, his forearms crossing as he studied the situation. Miriathans valued caution above all else, but there was a spark of recognition in his gaze. Lena had proven herself capable. "You may," he said. "Careful with the conduit. It is volatile." She knelt, tools in hand, and began adjusting the wiring. The sparks were small, but she worked with precision, hands moving quickly and deliberately. Rel observed silently, impressed by her composure. Humans were fragile, yes, but Lena had a strength that surprised him. It was not just physical or intellectual strength. It was the courage to act, to risk herself to ensure the safety of others. When the adjustment was complete, the conduit stabilized, the sparks ceased, and the room was quiet once more. Lena looked up at Rel and he nodded. "Well done," he said, the words simple, but they carried weight. Praise from a Miriathan commander was rare and significant. Lena smiled, a small, genuine curve of her lips that brightened the engine room. Days passed, and the bond between Lena and Rel grew stronger. She began to understand more of the ship's systems, anticipating problems before they occurred. Rel, in turn, began to acknowledge her suggestions, listening carefully when she spoke. The rest of the crew began to watch quietly, as the human's presence subtly changed the dynamics aboard the ship. It was as if her warmth and determination softened the rigid structure of their world, making even small interactions more thoughtful and attentive. One evening, the ship entered the outer rim of a solar storm. The stars around them blurred, colored streaks of light cutting through the darkness. The ship's shields shuddered under the pressure, alarms blaring as energy fluctuated across the hull. Rel moved with urgency, adjusting the shield generators, his hands moving quickly over controls he had memorized over decades. Lena followed, standing close but careful to avoid the areas of high energy. "You need assistance," she said, her voice calm yet firm. "I can help stabilize the secondary systems." Rel glanced at her, momentarily hesitant. Miriathans did not often accept help. To do so would be a sign of weakness. Yet there was no time for hesitation. He handed her a panel cover and a tool. "Do as you can," he said, his voice clipped but allowing for cooperation. Together they worked. Lena's human intuition guided her hands, quickly identifying small malfunctions that might have gone unnoticed. Rel followed her instructions, precise but adaptable, adjusting systems he might not have considered otherwise. Slowly the alarm subsided, the shield stabilized, and the hum of the engines returned to a steady rhythm. When the storm passed, Lena exhaled, her shoulders relaxing. She looked at Rel, whose expression remained calm but held a flicker of something softer. "You did well," he said again, though this time the tone carried a hint of admiration. "You too," she replied with a small smile. "We make a good team." For the first time, Rel allowed himself to consider her words beyond their literal meaning. The human beside him had become more than cargo. She was someone whose courage, intelligence, and warmth had earned his respect, and perhaps something more. Over the following weeks, Lena continued to learn about the crew and the ship. She discovered small rituals that the Miriathans performed, routines that gave structure to their lives. She participated when she could, offering small suggestions that were gradually accepted. The other crew members began to smile more, a rare sight among their species, and the ship itself seemed to become livelier, less mechanical, more aware of the presence of the human aboard. One night, as the ship passed through the shadow of a distant gas giant, Lena found herself in the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before her, bright and vibrant. She felt a sense of wonder, the kind humans had long cherished when looking at the universe. Rel entered silently, standing behind her, his gaze fixed on the same view. "You seem thoughtful," he said, his voice breaking the usual monotony. Humans often observed, he knew. But there was something different about her manner, a curiosity that went beyond simple survival or duty. "I am," she admitted. "I've seen so little of the universe before. Everything is new, exciting, and different." Rel considered her words. He did not fully understand excitement, not in the human sense, but he understood attention, care, and focus. Lena possessed all three, and her presence had changed the way he saw the ship, the crew, and perhaps even himself. Days later, the ship faced another challenge. A small asteroid field had gone undetected, and the sensors failed to alert them in time. The hull shook violently as the ship grazed several rocks. Panels sparked and alarms screamed across the corridors. Lena ran to Rel's side. "We need to stabilize the navigation grid," she shouted over the noise. Rel moved with precision, but the systems were overloaded. "Secondary manual controls," he said. "I will guide you." Together they worked side by side, hands moving in synchrony. Lena adjusted the controls. Rel monitored the power flow, and the ship slowly regained stability. The crisis passed and silence returned, broken only by their ragged breathing. "You," Rel started, then stopped. His species rarely spoke beyond necessity, yet he felt compelled. "You are remarkable." Lena smiled, her cheeks flushed from exertion. "I think we make a good team," she repeated. The statement was simple, but it carried weight. Both of them understood it. Not just for survival, but for something deeper, a connection born from shared experience, trust, and respect. As the ship approached the colony where Lena was originally meant to be delivered, a quiet tension filled the corridors. She had a choice: follow through with the arrangement she had no desire for, or stay aboard the ship that had become a new home. With companions who valued her for more than her status, Rel, usually distant and unreadable, waited near the docking bay. His posture was formal, yet his eyes followed her as she approached. The memory of their shared experiences, the warmth, the teamwork, the moments of trust, hung heavily between them. Lena lifted the small cargo box she had traveled with, the one that had once been her prison. She held it firmly, yet with a lightness now that she had learned to survive and adapt. She looked at Rel and spoke, her voice calm but filled with intention. "I think I'll stay. I still need help with this box." Rel's expression remained stoic, but a subtle shift passed over him, a flicker of understanding, of recognition. He had not known that humans could inspire such feelings, but he felt it now. The warmth she brought, literal and emotional, had changed him, and perhaps it could change others too. The crew watched in silence, unsure of what to expect. Myriathans rarely allowed personal choices to influence duty. Yet here was a human, asserting herself not through force, but through courage, determination, and warmth. The Starwind hauler departed from the colony, carrying both the human and the Myriathan commander, who had learned that life could be more than precision, order, and cold efficiency. Lena's laughter echoed softly through the corridors, mixing with the hum of the engines, a sound that had been rare aboard the ship before. Together, they moved through the stars. Two beings from entirely different worlds, yet connected through shared experience. One had brought warmth to the other's life and, in return, found a place in a world once thought too rigid and unforgiving for human emotions. For Lena, the journey had begun with fear and uncertainty, but it had led to connection, trust, and friendship. For Rel, it had begun with duty and discipline, but it had led to understanding, care, and perhaps a glimmer of something he could not name. And so, amid the endless stars and the cold void of space, two unlikely companions found in each other the strength, warmth, and courage to face whatever the universe might throw at them next. The small cargo box, once a symbol of isolation and fear, had become a symbol of partnership, shared responsibility, and a bond that neither human nor alien could have predicted. The ship continued on its course, silent but alive, carrying a story of trust, warmth, and unexpected friendship. Proof that even in the coldest reaches of space, humanity's light could shine and change the universe in subtle, profound ways.